Good afternoon, Mohammed, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation to be here today.
No, it's my pleasure.
Good. So, and thank you very much for coming to the session the other day also. I think it was very kind of illuminating. But today, for the benefit of all, what we are going to do is we will kind of break down the whole categories for EB1A. Now, many people like who approach us kind of ask us about this EB1A. They are too obsessed about these 10 categories. Okay, let us start with the fundamentals. What are these categories all about actually?
Yeah, so with the EB1A, USCIS has developed these categories that they expect people to achieve. It's kind of like a point system where they want people to accomplish certain things within these categories, and together you fall under the category of the EB1A, extraordinary individual. So they're kind of like a point system. They don't explicitly say it's points, but that's the way you could think about it, that they're tallying points up based off of the 3 criteria that you've selected. And because at the end of the day, it's a totality. They're combining your evidences and the entire case together. And so that's a good way to think about it. Like you're trying to tally up points.
Okay, now that begs another question actually, that why only 3 out of 10? What is the USCIS trying to look at or expect from people?
So yeah, I'm sure there's going to be people that can probably get 10 out of 10. You know, some of those completely in the stars type people. The restricting it to 3 criteria, I think, has 2 goals, right? One, to focus your ability into certain categories. They want to see you excel in certain things, right? And by limiting it to 3, you're also letting people know that it's not something that's going to be extremely excessive in terms of the evidentiary standard.
Okay, now in true sense, does this actually make somebody, why they call it extraordinary after it?
So they do have a very high criteria. So the criteria is still very high. So you have these 10 categories. You still have to do very specific things under each one. And it is higher level. But in regards to your question, is that what makes someone extraordinary? No. The evidence, the extraordinary individual is someone who could provide the evidence, and the evidence has specific weight. It shows something specific about you as an individual.
Understood. Now, the USCIS also has another category called exceptional ability in, I think, EB2.
Yes, the national interest waiver.
If you don't meet advanced degree, then they have exceptional ability. Now, how is that exceptional ability different from extraordinary ability?
Yeah. Okay. So just based off of the terms themselves, they kind of categorize them. Exceptional ability is you're exceptional, but it doesn't mean you're extraordinary. Extraordinary means you're above or I don't want to say above. You you are at a higher level than someone who is exceptional. It's just based off of the terms themselves. They're creating a separation, right? And they're also the EB1, EB2. These categories are in like a specific order. So it is easier to establish that you're an extraordinary individual than it is to it's harder to show that you're extraordinary than exceptional. And there are categories you have to complete with the EB2. They are distinct from in some ways from the extraordinary individual with the EB1. There are similarities, and the weight of the evidence is different.
Okay, now coming back to the fundamental, let's break down before we get into the specific, category by category. Let's talk about, EB1A, EB1B, and EB1C. there
Right.
seems to be, while all of them are called EB1 extraordinary ability.
Yes.
Now, if you look at it, yes, of course, for EB1A, you don't need a sponsor, you don't need a job, you don't need any kind of, like EB5, $1 million, you
Yes.
don't need firm, and you can be anywhere in the world, actually, that to apply this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, EB1B and EB1C do require jobs and other thing. I mean,
Yes.
as compared to, let's say, let me ask you a question as a lawyer, actually. So, on the scale of 1 to 10, if we were to put EB1A as 10, how would you put EB1B, EB1C, and EB2?
Okay, so the EB1s, I would put them at pretty much around the same levels. The extraordinary individual is an extraordinary person with extraordinary ability is definitely a little better, but outstanding professors and researchers do still need to establish a very high level of evidence, and so do the certain multinational executives. So I would put those, approximately at the same level when it comes to the EB1s, and then the national interest waiver in EB2 is slightly below those. And what does make these so attractive is the fact that there is no priority. There is no priority in regards to when the visas are issued. So we have a lot of people stuck in EB2s waiting for their visa to process, and that also is one of the reasons that they make this a little more difficult. Okay. But if I would say the EB1s are definitely the most difficult to get, and the EB1A is, they actually already show us the order of difficulty, just EB1A, EB1B, BC. So they've already kind of hinted at it when they established these laws, and they've hinted at what they think is the most difficult and the order that it's in.
Okay, now since today's topic is about breaking down about the 10 criteria, so let me take something which comes, most of the people who are working in companies and they're having regular jobs. And let's take I'm just picking up without any order of priority. Let's talk about evidence that you command a high salary or other significantly high remuneration in relation to the field. So could you talk more about this category now?
All right, so when it comes to specifically the high salary, what you're trying to show, so whenever we're looking at what is presented to USCIS in your application, you're first showing them a piece of evidence, and then you're trying to establish that this piece of evidence is weighty. It has an impact on your case, okay? And when it comes to the high salary, in some of the other categories, there really isn't a lot of evidence that you can provide, right? So if I'm saying I have a high salary, I just have to prove I have a high salary. And so this is one of the categories that I'm not going to say is easy to get, but it's one of those categories that are not hard to misconstrue or allows for bias or of the officer who's adjudicating your case, and subjective input. So if you are in like the top 10 to, I would maybe say in the above 10% in your field in terms of how much you're earning, so then you've reached this high salary. You know what I mean? So it's very straightforward, and the USCIS is very plain when it comes to this category. It's a high salary. And they break it down in terms of salary, remunerations, and compensation. So there are different methods of establishing that you are that you command a high salary. But it is, again, it's a more objective, straightforward, not a lot of subjective input into it. Establish what your salary is, or establish what your compensation is, and you show it to USCIS. This is different than maybe something like the artistic display or scholarly articles, where they first have to do multiple steps and first seeing, is it a scholarly article? Is it Is it your own authorship? Things like that. So there's multi-layers. You have a high
It is
salary.
straightforward. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when let's just say, for example, you mentioned that 10%, you should be in the 10%. Now, 10% of what? 10%?
The highest 10%. So your salary is first based off of the local area that you're in. So, for example, if you're in California and you're working in tech, you're competing against a lot more people and a lot more industry than if you're in, let's say, Arkansas, just for example. So the local high salary in California is going to be a lot higher. It's going to be skewed a lot more to the right than it is in Arkansas. So it's a high salary relative to your the compensation of others in comparison. So that's why I'm saying 10%. You're in the highest 10% of of earners in your field and in your geographic area.
Okay. Okay. So let's move to the next category, which is about evidence of your performance of a leading or a critical role in the distinguished organizations. Now, there are 4 words which are very unique: leading, critical, distinguished, and organizations. Now,
Yes.
who are the kind of people who would there? So I understand that there has been also a notification to an impact that even divisions and departments are being considered by latest. So which organizations are we talking about? Somebody who is having a startup or his own company or something like that. Will that work in this case?
So when it comes to the organization, so like you said, there's a specific language that is used, and each part of this statement requires a little bit of detailed looking, right? First, we gotta look at what leading is, and then what is a critical role, and what are these organizations. And so USCIS has pretty much explained what they consider a leading role. So first is leading or critical role. They use those interchangeably. It's either that or that. You don't have to be both leading and a critical person. Leading role is anything that establishes that within the divisions of the organization, you command authority and you have a specific title that lends to your leading role, right? A critical role is something more, a supporting role. So instead of someone who's critical to a let's say a project doesn't necessarily have to be the leading individual, right? That's why there's a distinction. They use both of those terms. So a critical person is someone who's necessary to the outcome of the project, or is necessary for the completion, or is necessary for the success of what is being worked on, or the success of the company, or the role success of the company. So those are differences between someone who's a leader and someone who's has a critical role. And the next thing we got to consider is the organizations, right? So the organization, you mentioned something about, can it be a startup? Can it be, does it have to be already established? So, and then there's also different divisions or departments within an organization. So, in the distinguished reputation. So the size, longevity of an organization is what usually lends itself to the distinguished reputation of an organization. So these are some of the subjective factors that you're going to have you have to establish about your organization. You have to, if you believe personally that your organization that you work with has a distinguished reputation, you have to establish it, all right? And then you're going to have to provide more evidence if this organization is not as well known, right? For me to say that Bank of America is a well-known organization with a distinguished reputation I can say it. I still have to provide evidence, just maybe some details about their income and a little bit of facts about it, but that's going to be a lot easier to establish that it's a distinguished organization than it is for a entrepreneur who recently or entrepreneur who recently established the corporation. So there's no longevity. Let's say it's been around for 5 years. This startup you're gonna need to provide more evidence to establish the fact, right? So that's what it comes to in regards to the leading critical role in a distinguished organization.
Okay. But just a quick question regarding that salary part. So you
Yes.
mentioned somebody locally in California,
Yes.
about a tech company. You just gave an example about it. Now, so what about someone who is outside the USA actually? So is that converted into dollars, or is it considered? How is the parameter assessed then in that case?
All right, that's actually a very interesting question. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics and USCIS, well, USCIS uses specific sources of information to establish whether you are a person of, if you're getting a high salary. So yes, the salary has to be in US dollars, right? But they're also requesting that you establish that it's a high salary based off of the geographic or position appropriate. So if there's two things you got to think about is the geographic and the position, and it has to be in US dollars or converted into US dollars. You got to establish it that way. And again, so if you don't have a geographic component, then you would have to establish it more. So like I said, if you're trying to establish a fact, you need to provide evidence to that fact. And if you don't have one piece of evidence to support the fact, you have to provide more evidence from a different place. So for example, let's say the geographic location is in question. Then you need to show that in regards to the position, the compensation is a lot higher. So if you bring it down here, you got to bring it up here. So that's how I would deal with that situation. But again, it has to be in US dollars, and I would recommend it, you to be in the United States when working on this, but it's not necessary.
Okay. Now let's take the next category, which is like evidence of your original scientific, scholarly, artistic, athletic, or business-related contribution actually here. So what can you elucidate on this?
Okay, so there again, a lot of these categories are very specific in terms of the terminology that they use, right? First, it has to be original contribution. It's your original work, and it's something that you have contributed to the field. It can't be, so it's kind of like when people write a thesis, right? When you're a doctorate or even in your master's, you're writing a thesis, you're expected to produce an original work. That's how you got to think about in regards to this original part. And then major significance, there's certain words that, you got to catch your attention. When they're a little vague or they can be understood by multiple people in different ways, that's got to attract your attention. So contributions of major significance. So what is major significance? And that's it's gonna be subjective based off of your field and the reputation that it gets, or like how much publicity it gets. So what I first think of when I think of major significance, I think of CRISPR. So this, enzyme technology using the editing of genes, right? This was like a huge breakthrough in science and in genetics and biology. So it was something that, Nobel Peace Prize was given for it. This original contribution to the field of genetics. I'm not saying that it has to be to that level, but I'm saying that it has to have an impact on the field. It can't just you can't just write an article and no one uses it. So one of the things that we look at is, are these articles being cited by other people? So are you influencing or impacting the field? So the way that you can the way you can weigh that is by citations. All right, that's another way you can, like, if in regards to an article. And there's also, like, you can get expert opinions or opinions of other people that say that you have made a major you've made an impact of major significance in the field. So these are things that, again, this major significance part is subjective, and so you have a fact that you're trying to establish, and then we are trying to prove it with evidence, and each piece of evidence is then looked at on its own. And so you have a piece of evidence that is stronger than the next piece of evidence, and that's okay. So, and the officer is going to be looking at them overall, and so that helps to establish the fact that it's of major significance.
Okay. Now, I will just take a pause here and ask you a different question altogether. Many people perceive that, and it is like EB1A, it is easier, or it is for people who are only PhDs, or of course, is it?
No, that's not true. What I'm saying isn't that it's only restricted to PhDs. I'm just saying that PhDs in their day-to-day work are more likely to do these things. But, project manager, a software engineer, even like an architect or an engineer, if you can impact your field, you can reach this category. You don't have to be a PhD. It just so happens that because the PhDs are in academia, they're pushing out a lot of articles. They're working and doing research on a day-to-day basis, whereas someone who has a 9-to-5 job can only do it on the weekends or in collaboration at work in regards to extra time to spend on it. So it just so happens that PhDs or doctors in this academic field are just more exposed to some of these things, but it's not restricted to them.
Okay, that's good actually. And then the next category we'll take up is the membership in associations in the field which demand outstanding achievement of their members.
Yeah, so this is actually one of my favorites, because it's kind of like, this is even better than salary, right? I just have to show that I'm in a membership, like I've been accepted into this society, right? And the criteria for people in the society is this, and this, right? And yeah, they're just very straightforward. And so the USCIS gives guidelines as to what types of membership is required. So, and what the organization looks at to make a decision whether they allow you to enter. So there has to be a threshold you have to pass in terms of your experience, education, years of work, etc., that you have to establish to be entered into this organization. So it's definitely something that I would highly recommend for someone that's trying to get this EB1A, that if you're in a field that does have societies of honor and recognition, to be a part of them.
Okay, now is it only like when you talk about salary, of course it's very objective and very straightforward. Organization that you are working now, has to be, now these things are plural in nature, or it is singular in a sense that one membership is sufficient, one role that or project that you did with the company that had a good impact, that is sufficient, or even in terms of contribution you spoke about, you wrote one article that had a good impact, that is sufficient, or it has to be multiple, like consistent over the period and something like that?
No, it needs to be multiple and consistent, unless it has a huge impact. So like I said, when you're trying to establish something, you can use little pieces of evidence that accumulate into something big, or you can use one piece of big evidence. So it's all pieces of evidence on a scale that's being measured out.
Okay, the next we will take up is evidence of published material about you in professional or major trade publication or other major media.
So this comes down to publicity. has someone talked about you? So has a major magazine talked about you? So and it's specified that it's professional or major trade publication. But they also, which is interesting. They first say professional and major trade, and then they say other media relating to your person's work. So that kind of expands it, and there has been policy notes that definitely expanded a lot more. It's not restricted to written material. It can be other forms, other pieces of media, other mediums of expression. So, and what's they request in terms of the published material is that you just have to provide them evidence of title, date, author of the material, and it just has to be well known. So there's as attorneys, there's Lawyerly, or there's a monthly magazine that's for lawyers that you can get a subscription for. That is a professional major media. If I was interviewed for immigration on that, that's a great piece of evidence. So what's actually really important is when you're trying to get an EB1A, you really have to be informed about the fringes of your field. Like sometimes we get sucked into our work and we get kind of narrow looking. We gotta really expand. That's what they want for someone who's extraordinary, that they're not just doing their work and doing their work well. They're using their free time to get to know people, even journalists or writers, or they're more expansive. What they used to call them back in the day is a Renaissance man, a Renaissance woman, that you're not restricted to just one thing and that's the only thing you can do. You're able to use your knowledge and experience to do multi-layered things, and that's what makes an individual extraordinary.
So basically, you may be expert in one particular field, but at the same time, there has been various facets of your personality demonstrated in different levels at a different thing. So all cumulatively that matters. Is that what I
Yeah. So just being an expert isn't enough. Just being an expert isn't enough. You gotta do more than just being an expert in your particular field. And this is kind of like a little bit of an example that, how am I going to get published in a magazine, right? You got to talk to people, you got to network, you got to put yourself out there. So it's also about your personality and your willingness to do certain things.
Wonderful. Now, we take again a very interesting. It is perceived and believed that again that this is only for Nobel laureates, Olympians, or Oscar awardees. But at the same time, it says that evidence of receipt of lesser nationally or internationally recognizes prizes or awards for excellence.
Yes.
Now, just the language is evidence of receipt of lesser nationally, then is or internationally recognized prizes or awards for excellence. So,
yes.
I mean,
it's kind of jumbled in there. Yeah, they have a lot of nuance in just a single small sentence.
So what is an award? What do you mean by an award in this case? I mean, if you look at a dictionary definition of award, you can interpret it the way you want.
Yeah.
So in law, as we understand that there is a legislative intent and there is something called as a administrative purpose. Actually, then we'll like to see it at a face value and something from a legislative intent. So when USCIS looks at its own regulations, and would it look at it from a legislative intent perspective from an officer, because judiciary would always look at from a legislative intent, but from an administrative agency, would it look it as a at a face value, or would it go into a legislative intent, and what is it in this case?
Yeah, so what I always try to tell people is that the officer that's looking at your case may or may not be an attorney, right? Not all the officers that are reviewing these cases have an in-depth knowledge of the law. So they read the standards, the criterion, and then they look at the evidence, and they just have to be able to argue or establish if they agree or they don't agree, and then they have to argue as to why they don't agree, right? And again, they use pretty much the policy manual, and if they have any further doubts or questions, they go on to maybe AAO decisions, the Administrative Appeals Office. So when it comes to what the officer is doing, it's most likely going to just be a strict reading of what's going on and then getting a little bit of guidance from other places. So they're going to read receipt of lesser nationally or internationally recognized prizes or awards for excellence in the field of endeavor, right? And so they're going to sit there. They've done this a bunch of times, right? So this isn't the first case they see. They realize that this is something that you're trying to establish, and then they're gonna first most likely work backwards, right? Is this the field or endeavor? Is this award in the field that they're talking about? Because that's something that's easy to check off. So yeah, you did get an award or a nationally recognized or internationally recognized prize in your field, right? So a prize and an award, I think prizes usually have monetary gain attached to it, whereas an award is just like a plaque.
Okay.
And it's in it, the controlling adjective in this sentence is excellence. All right, so they're trying to see that is it in your endeavor, like that's the easy one to check off, and then excellence. So are you being recognized for your great ability or excellence in the field, right? So whether it's an award or a prize, what they're looking for is, was it given to you because you're an excellent individual?
Okay. Now here comes a question, Mohammed, is when we talk about prizes or award, you use the word recognition, which is one of the, I mean, if you look at the dictionary meaning of award also, it is one of the recognitions. Actually, it's a token for recognition. Now obviously it means that it is not a part of some competition. So somebody may just recognize you by virtue of offering you a letter.
Yeah. So you can be awarded or recognized, internally in your office, by your boss. So yeah, and the what an award or a prize is a lot easier to establish than the excellence.
Okay, but in this case, would if you are recognized by your office, would it fall under national or internationally then in that case?
So whenever you see or,
yeah,
that doesn't mean it has to do the one before it. So lesser nationally or internationally recognized or awards for excellence. So each or, think of it as like a separation. Okay. And you have to do one of those, not all of them. So if you're aiming for lesser nationally, receipt of lesser nationally, that's the one that you're going to aim for, right? And this is a prize or an award. And then there's internationally recognized, and then there's award.
Okay, now so this is a more from a perspective of an academic understanding of a legal sentence.
Yes, so a legal sentence and conjoins or separates. You don't have to do everything when there's or.
Wonderful. This is very interesting. So you are saying that before or I can put a comma. Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much.
Okay. So and in any document something similar to this. So if there is no comma, we assume it is a connection.
Yes.
Okay. So it is a construction of the document or regulation that matters.
Yes. So it's very important. Like when you're reading a piece of legislation, an or is dramatically different than an and. It can change completely how a law is viewed or understood. So it's very important that this is something that's recognized.
But this is very, very helpful, Mohammed, because this gives in a very deeper perspective. So let's say, for example, if I'm working for a, let's say, Fortune 500 company, and
Mhm.
obviously the CEO of the Fortune 500 company would be a very famous person,
Mhm.
good influencer in the field.
Yes.
So if I were to get a recognition for my work, even from my CEO, if I'm working in a company and he's also pretty well known, can I say it's an award for excellence for me? I get it in form of a letter, I get it in form of
Yeah.
a award.
So I would say yes. But what I would like to see in the letter is the word award and excellence. So let's say the CEO of the company is recognizing you for something, right? In the certificate or in the email or in the letter, the words, "We are awarding you with this recognition for your excellence." That's what I would be looking for. Because when exact language is used, it's hard to argue against it, because what's the USCIS officer going to say? Like, oh, you got this award because you did a good job, or it was your birthday.
Okay.
No, you need to say that I was awarded this because I was excellent in the field that I'm working in.
Okay, now this is a very interesting point because we spoke about a couple of categories, and I have been, for every category, I've been trying to bring in a reference if somebody is working in an organization. Now, still, you talk about, salary, we spoke about distinguished organization, we spoke about membership, we spoke about, critical role and this lesser or international, and we said even in certain circumstances, how this particular category can be fulfilled by people who are, kind of working in their establishments. Now, here comes a question here that while this is something, this particular award, this particular whole visa green card category can be done by self-petition. And why is it that then in that case, if somebody is working for, let's say, a very famous company or an established company or a Fortune 500 company, does it imply in your assessment that there is a more degree of likelihood, like they would go for EB2 or L1 visa or EB1C or even H1B? It is a very straightforward process for them. If companies were to, kind of sponsor their employees for EB1A, it would even become further straightforward for them.
So if you had your employer's assistance in establishing this criterion,
yes, not this criteria, the entire green
all
card.
of them, yeah, any of them, yeah, of these criterion, would it? Honestly, I think with the assistant, like if your HR department, so the HR department usually helps with H1Bs, they're helping with the EB2s, they're involved in the application process, they talk to the attorneys, some of them, like I've met, when I've worked with the different companies, some of these HR people, pretty much know the entire process. If these HR people were willing to assist people because one of the things that makes establishing this criterion difficult is time, right? It takes time to publicize your work. It takes time to write an article. It takes time to judge someone's work. All these things take time. So if there was someone there to facilitate or assist in helping the employees establish these things, I definitely see like employers would definitely see a lot more success and a lot of things move a lot more quickly.
So I think, what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, Mohammed. So let's say, for example, we have always been hearing, we call a lot of people who are, kind of great achievers, and we have been inviting other EB1A achievers to come here. And they always, it scares off a lot of people that their petition is running into 1,000 pages, 2,000 pages, the whole petition with all set of evidences. Now, of course, because we are breaking down into various documents, we are trying to fulfill each category and everything. Now, are we saying that if I'm working with, let's say, one of the Fortune 500 companies, and let's say, for example, my company is ready to sponsor me or help me for meeting this requirement, they file I-140 not even as a self-petition, but even as a principal sponsor and I become the beneficiary for EB1. I don't.
You can't do that. You can't do that where you're the beneficiary. You're still self-petitioning, right?
Well, it doesn't. Companies can sponsor, no, EB1A, because I can be a sponsor as a company, and I can always choose myself. I mean, a company can choose me to be a beneficiary.
Yes, but are we talking about facilitating their completion of these criterion, or just like in general?
Like the way EB2 is done or EB1C is done, we do it like for EB1A. The company is saying that, okay, I will do this for, let's say, Ranjit. I mean, the company says that they will do it for me. And they, in the I-140 form, principal applicant or the sponsor, I mean, petitioner is the company, and they do EB1A for me, and they justify in a petition letter, maybe 50 pages, 100 pages, all the 10 criteria or 3 criteria or 4 criteria, and they say that he's a person of extraordinary ability. Now then, isn't that fulfills the evidence by itself, because the company is saying this for somebody?
No. Okay. So again, when you're trying to establish something, who it comes from, and the amount of weight a piece of evidence is given depends on a few factors: who it's coming from and what it is.
I got it. So
I'll automatically say you're being biased.
Okay, so if I'm the petitioner and the company gives the evidence that the weight is more, is that what I'm hearing?
I'm still providing the evidence, but I'm getting it from the company.
Absolutely. So that the weight will be more in that case for that individual. Okay, I hear this. So the documentation would become a lot simpler if the company is ready to support an individual.
Yeah, I think facilitation and support would be something that would definitely help a lot of people.
Well, that's wonderful. So we have spoken about, I think, all the category membership. I think published material about you we spoke about. Now judging. Would you like to?
Judging. Yeah. So judging again is one of those objective, like almost objective criteria. So the person's participation either individually or on a panel as a judge of the work of others in the same or an allied field of specialization, right? So did you judge someone else's work? And they do reference peer review. They also reference a dissertation committee, but they also use judging of a competition or some type of award. But the only restriction is that it's in the field of specialization or an allied field. So you can't judge, if you're in IT, you can't judge artwork. Like you can't just go to your local community center and be like, judge someone's art. That's not considered judging. You need to do it in your area of specialization.
Okay, now here when you say judge the work of others, either individual, so here is nothing about international or something. Somebody.
No.
If it is as a natural course of my job, then what happens?
Natural course of your job?
Yes. So suppose if I'm a professor or if I'm a teacher.
That's fine. So you're judging like your students' work. Absolutely. So I would say that you have to judge people at the same level as you or higher.
Okay. That is the objective of the whole category here. Actually.
That it's about your peers, because one of the things that they say, is that you're judging the same allied field or specialization. So if you're judging someone's work, they either have to be in your same field or a similar field, but they're also insinuating that they either have to be at your same level or higher, and not significantly lower. So if you're a PhD student and you're judging the work of undergraduate students, I wouldn't say that completely takes it away. I would say that these undergraduate students are still producing work, and you do have to judge them, and it is a competition. So I just wouldn't take it so far as maybe high school, like a high school science fair wouldn't be the same thing as like a competition for a scholarship or something in college.
Perfect. And I mean, where would patents come in here actually? Like, evidence of your original scientific, scholarly, artistic. So where would patents fall into all this?
So patents, I would usually have them fall under major significance in the field, like you contributed to the person's original scientific, scholarly, artistic, athletic, or business-related contributions of major significance in the field. That's where I would usually put patents. But you could also, so when it comes to artistic display, it's one of those that are vague. So you can use a lot of pieces of evidence to try to establish it. With patents, I wouldn't say a patent falls unless you like your patent, you're displaying your patent and you go show it off. One of the things I like for artistic display is maybe is that is kind of unique in the way of establishing it is maybe if you read an article at a symposium or at a conference, or you're doing like a book signing, like just displaying your work.
Okay, now this is very interesting because we have left two categories: evidence of commercial success in the performing arts, and second is about display. Now, are they strictly for artists according to your assessment, or is it?
No, artistic display?
Yes.
No, so the artistic display of person's work in the field at artistic exhibitions or showcases, all right? The venue of the work is artistic exhibition. So what is artistic? Artistic is a very specific word. Like artistic is defined as, having or revealing natural creative skill, right? Okay. Are you using natural creative skill when you're doing your work? I would say that even writing can be an artistic, natural creative skill, but what they say is display. So you have to display it. So when they say display, I would understand it as a common term that you're showing it to people. Are you showing your work in an artistic way? So
I got it. So that's that is another aspect that this entire philosophy or the whole jurisprudence of EB1A allows you to be a creative to an extent that it can be interpreted to the way we want. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yeah. So like I said, the law is the language, right? There's language, but there's gaps between the words, right? So okay. There's ways of establishing facts in different ways. So it's the document, I would not say this is a dead document. This is a living document, and it's a living interpretation of the criterion.
So you are saying that even somebody is speaking in a conference, it would fall under even display, one can utilize it?
Yeah, I would. So one of the things that you have to do is provide evidence, right? If you're at a conference, how are you going to prove it? How are you going to provide that evidence to USCIS, right? Are you just going to tell them, oh, I just spoke at this conference? You also got to think about how you're going to show it to them. You can't show them a video. You can't send videos in the mail, right? So what you have to do is do pictures or screenshots, right? So you can say, yeah, I was at this conference. Here are pictures of me at the conference. Here's my poster at the conference, right? So if you're trying to establish something, you have to provide pieces of evidence that support that fact. So if you're trying to say my speech at a conference is an artistic display, prove it.
I got it. So I think this closes our I think commercial success is very clear. It is performing arts is a one single word, I guess. So that's what we have to be. So I don't think do you suggest that this can be interpreted for a non-science, non-artistic professionals?
So what are you referring to?
Evidence of your commercial success in the performing arts.
So performing arts is specific to performing arts.
Okay, so that's very
right. Performing arts is performance. So yeah, it has to be a performance.
Perfect. So I think today we broke down all the categories and we had a very innovative approach. We spoke about the, kind of how companies can help people to kind of do it. Then we understood even the jurisprudence of law in terms of, how to read the sentence and what are the implications of it, and seminars, patents, how they can be utilized. Are there any other questions from the audience? I'll be more than happy to take it as we are coming near the time. So any questions, please be free to ask if I have missed out something about any category.
And I would also say one of the questions in the chat box is which criteria speaking at a conference come under. So we just talked about, you can try to construe it in a way that it's artistic display, but you can also use that as scholarly authorship of scholarly work, because usually when you're giving a speech at a conference, you're writing your speech. So you can also use that as in that criteria as well. Some of these things can overlap.
Mohammed, when we look at all other visa categories, where from B1, B2 to EB1, let's say, exactly, it's a complete extreme of the whole spectrum of visas.
Yes.
Green card. Now, till you go to, I think, up to EB1A and 1B. If you see EB1C also, it's very mechanical. In the sense, there are check boxes everywhere. I think to some extent, EB1B also allows you to give little flexibility, but it is
there is.
It is not that. It is little liquid crystal, you can say. I mean, it's a little viscous still. But here, what I'm understanding from you today is this is completely fluid. Actually, EB1A, the way we interpret it, it allows us to give.
Some of the criteria definitely are fluid. Yeah, definitely.
But why is it that only for EB1A it has been like this, while in when it comes to even EB5 or when you talk of EB4, 3, 2, or other things, or even up to EB1C, it's so kind of fixed about everything, actually, so rigid.
So I would also say the national interest waiver also provides some flexibility.
Yes.
But the reason I think those two things provide flexibility is because you're trying to establish you are, as an individual, fall under a specific category. You are a type of person, right? And USCIS is, by providing some flexibility, is saying these types of people can establish these things.
Okay. Now this is something, question which has come, that can articles, robotics, big data published in LinkedIn consider as scholarly article? So
again, you gotta establish two things: a scholarly article. So maybe it's a scholarly article, but is it in a professional or major trade publication, right? Or other major media, right? So it has to fall under one of those three things. So if you're writing an article that is scholarly, right? And scholarly means it's original research, experimentation, philosophical discourse. That's what they usually refer to in terms of scholarly article. And again, this one has or, it's not and, professional or major publication or other major media. Other major media can be YouTube, LinkedIn, so other major media can definitely encompass an article about AI, robotics, big data published on LinkedIn.
So there has been, in fact, a recent circular which allows the online publication also. So, and if there is a comments or reviews that if you are able to present, even if somebody were to use online medium and kind of demonstrate evidences of reviews from a professionals, would that be good enough?
Find reviews of individuals? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah. So, for example, if I kind of write some article, that's what the question states actually. If I write some articles and if there are reviews by people on that, commentary on those articles, which have been written that it is excellent. I get, let's say 10,000 likes. I am doing an event where there are 300 people participating. Let's say even on a LinkedIn Live as we are doing today. Now, would that be considered as a standard to fulfill any of the criteria or public purpose of publication or showcase?
So it could be public, it could be a showcase, and like I just said, it's artistic display, and it's also a authorship of a scholarly article. So I would say that it could all fall under multiple.
One activity or one fact can go manifest into different categories also. Will that be?
Yes.
Wonderful. That's great. Any other question, guys? You can put it on chat box or you can ask question. So I think if there are no other questions, we will kind of stop it. And so we will kind of end this session right now. So thank you very much, friends. Have a great day.
Yes, you have a wonderful day.
Yeah, that's great.